Hi everyone, my name's Ryann Unabia. I was supposed to be presenting in person, but as Shantae mentioned, I was exposed to COVID at work, and I didn't want to risk getting anyone sick, so I'm doing it virtually now. I'm an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa, and I currently serve as an ICWA specialist for the state through the Department of Children and Family Services. In the past, I've been a mentor on the reservation when I was younger. I was a supervisor at a withdrawal and treatment center. I've been a teacher for my tribe. And more recently, I've presented at conferences for the Native Leadership Academy. That's through the University of Iowa. I'm passionate about advocating for Native children and families and also raising awareness of Native issues. Sorry, I have to get my slides going. There we go. So today I'll be specifically presenting about ICWA. There's several documents out there that talk about ICWA, but they're usually either for attorneys or caseworkers. So I wanted a piece that's kind of like a 101 just for the community in general. So what is ICWA? ICWA stands for the Indian Child Welfare Act of 1978. It is a federal law, and the purpose is to protect the best interests of Indian children and to promote the stability and security of Indian tribes and families. ICWA requires that a child's family and tribe be notified of any custody proceedings if they're taken into care by the state. ICWA also recognizes the unique political status of Indian tribes, and ICWA has been called the gold standard of child welfare policies by at least 18 different national child welfare organizations. I found a brief clip on YouTube that really highlights the history of ICWA, and I'd like to play that right now.
Child removal in Native communities in the United States begins at the very beginning, long before there was a United States.
This is Matthew Fletcher, a law professor at Michigan State University and a citizen of the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians.
The very earliest moments of Indian child removal in the United States occurred during the Revolutionary War. One of the tools the U.S. used to fight Indian tribes was to burn villages, burn towns, burn crops, kidnap children and their mothers, hold them for ransom, and force peace negotiations with the tribes.
By the beginning of the mid-19th century, the U.S. government, believing that white Christian values were needed to civilize Native people, began the process of destroying Native tribes through forced assimilation.
One of the ways you do that is to strip Indian tribes of their children, take them off the reservation to have them learn English, learn American ways of life, so-called civilization, religious instruction.
Which was often done by forcing children into boarding schools, operated and funded by the United States government, which believed removing children from Native communities was in their best interest.
Fast forward to the Great Depression.
The government had less resources, and boarding schools, which had for so long been at the forefront of Native assimilation, began shutting down. This is when the government initiated the Indian Adoption Project, a federal program that forcibly removed Native children from their homes and placed them with white families for adoption.
I was removed from my family at 18 months of age, and then I was placed with a white couple when I was 2.
This is Susan Harness, a member of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes and a victim of the federal government's Indian Adoption Project in the early 1960s. It took Susan decades to finally connect with her birth family.
What I told myself that I really wanted is I wanted to find the people who look like me. Because I was tired of being the only brown person in the communities where I lived and not having anybody around that knew what that felt like or even cared what that felt like.
You hear a lot of benevolent rhetoric about why the government is doing this. The idea was often conveyed that if Indian children stayed within their families or in their communities, they even used the rhetoric, it was like a dead end.
This is Margaret Jacobs, a history professor at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln and a preeminent scholar of native child removal.
In child placement agencies, they were often deciding to remove American Indian children from their families on the basis that extended family members were taking care of them or that their mothers were working outside the home.
Always under the guise of the child's best interests. And by the 1970s,
25 to 35% of all Indian children had been separated from their families.
This had a devastating effect on Native communities.
If you take the children and they never learn of their heritage, of their tribal religions, and they never get schooled into how to become leaders in their own nations, it's a way to slowly kill that tribe and that collective identity.
Which is why, against the backdrop of the social movements of the 1960s and 70s, Native communities found their voice.
And then you have these very radical organizations that come about in the 1960s, such as the American Indian Movement.
It is legally our right to have an independent nation.
Who are using more like the tactics that you might find with the Black Panthers in the African American community or other parts of the civil rights movement. They're occupying the island of Alcatraz in the San Francisco Bay, for example. They're marching on Washington.
It was in this context that a series of hearings were held in Congress, ultimately leading to
the Indian Child Welfare Act,
a groundbreaking law enacted with the goal of reversing the tide of centuries of Native child removal. The result has been that ICWA has had a remarkable impact on keeping Native families together.
So there's been several benefits of the Indian Child Welfare Act. In my opinion, the number one benefit is keeping families together and also reuniting children with their parents. ICWA also helps to support tribal sovereignty, which is important. We need to continue reminding state officials that tribes do have a unique political status. Helping to keep the Native families together also helps promote the longevity of tribal nations. It helps create community support for children and families within care. And it also helps us to reclaim our culture. With keeping families together, a frequent question I get is if a non-Native family member is able to be a preference, or does the family member have to be Native? To answer this in short, any family member is the number one placement, whether the family member is Native or not. And then secondly, the next preference would be that the child remain within a family of the same tribe. If that's not possible, then a Native family in general. And then the last placement would be foster care. So I also want to point out, though, that the order of preference can vary depending on each case's unique situations and also what the tribe wants too. Preferences of the child and bio parents can be taken into consideration when appropriate. For example, a child may have lived in one city for 10 plus years and want to remain in that city. That's something that would be taken into consideration. And sometimes we have bio parents who want to remain anonymous and they don't want family or the tribe knowing that they have youth in care. That will also be taken into consideration. So what technically is an Indian child? An Indian child means any unmarried person who is under the age of 18 and is either enrolled in a tribe or is eligible to be enrolled in a tribe. Currently, there are 574 federally recognized tribes, and each tribe determines their own enrollment eligibility, not the state of Illinois, not any caseworker, not a judge. I'm going to take 4 different tribes to highlight how enrollment eligibility can differ. The Mississippi Band of Choctaw requires a 1/2 blood quantum of specifically Choctaw Indian blood. whereas Red Lake Nation requires a 1/4 blood quantum of specifically Red Lake Indian blood. The Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa requires a 1/4 blood quantum of Indian blood in general. So a child would not have to be 1/4 Turtle Mountain Chippewa. They just need to be 1/4 Native in general with a Turtle Mountain ancestor. And Cherokee Nation requires documentation that directly connects the person to an enrolled ancestor on the Dawes rolls. There is no blood quantum for Cherokee Nation. You just need to prove lineage to someone on the Dawes roll. Some tribes also use only paternal or maternal lineage to determine if a child can be enrolled or not. So if a child is an Indian child, then an ICWA specialist is assigned to the case. ICWA specialists within our state, we help aid in providing active efforts to the family. We help to identify placements that fit under the ICWA guidelines. We aid in notifying the child's tribe and the child's parents of any child custody proceedings going on. And we work to actively involve the child's tribe and parents in the proceedings. Some people ask me, what are active efforts? People will hear reasonable efforts more frequently when it comes to foster care, but active efforts are a step above reasonable efforts. Active efforts are affirmative, thorough, and timely efforts intended to maintain or reunite an Indian child with his or her family. For example, a reasonable effort could be making a medical appointment for bio parent to attend, whereas an active effort would be making the medical appointment for bio parent to attend, and then also ensuring they're able to get to their appointments. An example of that would be calling the parent the night before their appointment to see if any situations come up that would be a barrier for them, such as do they need transportation, do they need help with childcare, etc. I also get asked by the community a lot, how many ICWA cases are there? So this is a hard question to give a direct answer to because we have two types of ICWA cases. We have open ICWA cases or current cases, and we also have confirmed ICWA cases. So with either type of case, the start of the intake is the same. So first, a youth will be taken into state care. At some point in time, there's belief that the child might have a Native ancestor. And then at that point, a caseworker is supposed to complete the intake form CPS 307, which I'll show you in a minute. And then after that form is completed, the ICWA team will receive it and will send out inquiries to any possible tribe and also to the BIA. We send out the inquiry to the BIA just to see if they happen to have any recommendations of further tribes that may be related. And then we wait for all of the tribal responses to come back to us. And depending on the tribal response, we'll determine whether or not the ICWA case becomes confirmed. So there's usually three types of responses we get from tribes that either yes, they're eligible to be enrolled or they are enrolled, or no, they are not eligible, or lastly, they might be eligible, but they need more information. If they need more information, it is up to the ICWA team to help gather that information to give to the tribe so they can make a decision. I'm going to show you the intake form now. First, a caseworker will fill out their own information. Then they will tell us what type of case this is. Are your parental rights going to be terminated? Have parental rights already been terminated? Are they in adoption, etc.? And then we also like to know what is the end goal for this child. My cases personally have been mainly returned home within 1 year, which is great, just reuniting the children with their family. Then we will have the child's information listed, including any siblings. Then we want to know, where is the child currently placed at? Are they with relatives? Are they in a foster home? Is the foster home native or not? And then we go on to ask about information on bio mom and dad. We will ask, is bio mom identifying a tribe? So if they say yes, we'll usually ask, what's the tribe's name, or at least roughly where are they located at? There's also the option to say no, and the most complex part is unidentified. So this can be something such as, I heard a great grandparent of mine was native, it was somewhere in Virginia, I'm not sure. So there might be native. If that's the case, we will check off unidentified. And that, whether it says unidentified or yes, both of those will trigger the ICWA process. The reason why we go ahead and start the ICWA process with unidentified is because through generations of removal and relocation, there's families who aren't sure if they're native or not. And as we do some more digging, we find out that there is a connection there. So we'll try to gather as much information about bio parents and also bio grandparents on both sides. And then we'll ask for all of the information about the court proceedings for the children. The reason why we'll ask about the next court proceeding is so that an ICWA specialist, such as myself, can attend that court hearing and help advocate on behalf of the family and child. And then the last page would be where any information at all that might be related can be put down. This is something such as, say, a child heard a great uncle of theirs across the country may have been enrolled. That would go ahead and go under this section. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint now. So here are some notes too about when caseworkers do these intake forms. It really needs to be addressed that a family member does not need to be fully certain on whether or not there's Native ancestry. The ICWA team needs to go ahead and investigate any possibility. Also, there isn't a specific point where a family needs to say if they're Native or not. Caseworkers should be asking the family and child throughout the life of the case. So whether it's towards the beginning, middle, or end of the case, a family or a child can come forward and say they think they might be Native. And no matter where it's mentioned at, this will trigger the ICWA process. This is where some opponents for ICWA will raise concerns. There might be concerns that, well, a said child has been with a foster family for a year already, and they've already formed attachments with the foster family. This could have been avoided if ICWA was complied with early on. So if a caseworker doesn't comply with ICWA, it can cause further trauma to the children because they're being bounced around from houses. I also want to mention that ICWA shouldn't be completely just skipped over, because at any point, if it's determined that the child's enrolled or eligible to be enrolled, the case can be appealed and overturned within court. I'm going to go ahead and show another clip on someone's personal experience on the trauma of ICWA not being complied with from the beginning.
Oregon social worker called us and said, we have 3 Native children that are without a home, and we may be separating them if we can't find a home. So to go from 1 child to 3 to adopt, it was quite a leap. But, prayed about it, did a lot of soul searching, and made the decision. We're ready to do this. So I grew from 1 to 4. I started the work. I was told, again, we're the only Native home certified. And under Indian Child Welfare Act, if there's no one in their village, Alaska village, no one in their family, then we would be the eligible home. And so I started the work. I bought a 7-passenger SUV so I could, transport 4 kids and grandma and, mom and dad. Expanded the house. I built an addition with 2 new rooms. I was ready to welcome these children home. I was notified, and I was on an airplane, landed in Spokane, got a text message, and my heart sunk. I just knew it wasn't going to be good news if I'm getting a text message. So I called the social worker, and she explained, I'm sorry. The children were, the selection committee in Oregon, they have a committee, and they select among the applicants the children's home. And the selection committee picked another family. And my instant reaction was, weren't we the only Native family? And the person said, I can't respond to that question. I can't reveal anything about the other families. So I accepted it that day. But the next day, it just incensed me to no end to think that these children could be right now being placed with a non-Indian home. And I'm a certified home. And I went through this whole process. And so I wrote a letter to the Secretary of Oregon Health and Human Services. And my question was simply, I just want to know that the Indian Child Welfare Act was complied with. And I found out that Oregon has a statute that implements ICWA, and it requires that the judge make a determination that a Native home is not deemed eligible. If there's some reason that, they may be certified, but they're not in the child's best interest, it has to be a judicial determination. So I wrote the letter reciting not only ICWA, federal law, state law, and to the best of my knowledge, no judge ever deemed me disqualified. I just want to know whether. So I got a response back that we looked into this. Well, first letter, we're going to look into this. Second letter, after they looked into it, we found and determined the social worker did not follow the Indian Child Welfare Act. However, and this was something I told my family, I said, I'm almost positive they're going to find a shirt-tailed relative, because that's the only thing that could trump another Native home. So come to find out, they found a shirt-tailed relative, like a 4th cousin or a cousin of some sort, and the kids were placed with this non-Indian distant relative. And I, at that point, thought, wow, I just went through this whole process, wanted to welcome these Native kids to our home, and now it's likely they're with another second non-Indian family. I started the process, well, actually, before starting the process again, at that point, I did, do I even want to pursue this? I've gone through 2 Native kids as a very qualified, certified Native home, and both times I get rejected. Do I even want to, expose myself to that again, go through that whole process again? But something deep in felt, yes, I believe in this. I want to provide a home. I have a great deal to offer children. So started the process again. This time, a social worker called from Absentee Shawnee tribe. And I was very upfront. I want to make sure, and I relayed the whole experience. And this social worker from the Absentee Shawnee tribe was very, very helpful and very much understood where I was coming from and very much understood that we wanted to make this work. Great deal of support from the state, from the absentee Shawnee tribe. And this was starting probably in March. By August, at the time, Quinault was hosting the Tribal Journeys. So we welcomed 100 canoes and 15,000 people to the shores at Quinault for the Tribal Journeys. That was on a Saturday. The next morning, I caught a flight to Tulsa, Oklahoma, to meet these two boys, these absentee Shawnee boys. That night, we went out to pizza. I took them to the Cowboy Museum. I was really nervous to meet them for the first time. I remember being up in the hotel room, getting the call from the social worker. They're here, they're in the lobby, and just checking my hair, feeling like, how am I, they're going to meet these two people, could be their future parents. And it was quite a moving experience to go through that when you're meeting kids for the first time, knowing that they have no family, no parents, no tribe, and you're about to bring them in. And so it was an excellent meeting. And I'll never forget the one little boy, when we took him back to the social worker, he was in the back seat. I opened the door and he said, "Am I going to see you again?" And I assured him, "I'm going to see you. I will see you again. And you're a good boy." And I, really tried as much as I could to relay how loved he was and how, much we wanted to bring him to Washington. They looked at the map where Washington was. That was in first part of August. Mid-August, my son was at Stanford University at a computer camp. I was about ready to go to his graduation ceremony from computer camp, and I get this phone call from an Oregon social worker that said, "Do you remember those 3 kids? Unfortunately, the home they were placed in for adoption didn't work out, and we now need another home." And I was devastated. I thought, I just met these 2 boys, assured them, and these are 3 others that I fought through 2 levels of appeal, and now I have to make the choice. But for Oregon's failure to follow ICWA in the first place, I wouldn't have been in the situation, nor would these 2 boys have had, the prospect or the idea that they would have a home, all because the state didn't follow the Indian Child Welfare Act. So for about 3 weeks, and it just crushed me. We had the boys' phone numbers, and we were calling them, and they would ask, when do we get to come to Washington? And I was trying to decide, to take those 2 or the 3. And for a good 2-3 weeks, I actually thought of taking all 5. And in some respects, I wonder if I should have taken all 5, because it was an adjustment. But I ultimately decided we would take the 3.
Okay, so I like sharing that clip just to highlight how trauma for a total of 5 children and a foster mom could have been avoided if the state were to have complied with ICWA in the first place. I'm going to mention some high-profile ICWA cases now. So the Supreme Court has heard and ruled on whether or not ICWA is constitutional several times. One that you might be familiar with is called Adoptive Parents versus Baby Girl, and sometimes it's also known as Baby Veronica. And more recently, you may have heard about Holland versus Brackeen, which the Supreme Court will be hearing soon. So there's been several states that have mentioned their support of ICWA, including Illinois. And last time I checked, there's only been 3 states that have officially said they are not in support of ICWA. And these states are Texas, Indiana, and Louisiana. ICWA is very much still needed today, and it is still relevant. Native kids are 4 times more likely to be removed by state child welfare systems than any other race. And in 13 states, Native children are 14 times more likely to be taken into foster care. And 56% of the adopted Native kids are adopted outside of their families and outside of their Native communities. So in addition to helping with the Native custody cases, ICWA specialists also help advocate for Native rights inside of the courtroom. We advocate for the Native community to state organizations. We help to culturally educate other individuals within the state agencies. We engage with the Native community, whether that's helping to host a job fair or attending powwows. We just want to be there with the community so that we're an easily accessible liaison between the Native community and the state governments. We also help to recruit Native foster homes. We recruit Native state employees, and in general, we help to spread awareness of Native issues. And this is my contact information in case anyone in the future wants to get a hold of me to share concerns or ask any questions at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryann. I guess we can take questions from the room. Does anyone have any questions? Any comments? If you do, come over here. Or even online, any of our guests online, you can feel free to unmute yourself or type in your question to the chat. Ryann, I have a question. Can you share, so for example, if I'm interested in becoming a Native foster parent, who would I go to for that? And like, what is that process like? Because the one video, she talked about being a certified Native home. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Mm-hmm. So me or my coworker would probably be the easiest people to get in contact with. And then from there, we would personally talk to the DCFS workers who are involved with licensing foster homes. I'm currently in the process of trying to, identify the Native homes within Illinois, because at this moment, we don't have certified Native homes. We don't have a process to do that. We have Native families, but no way in our system to designate them as a certified Native home. So I've been working with the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion to go ahead and start marking those. So for the time being, I would go ahead and relay any information of interested foster parents to the DCFS workers. And then I would kind of be following step by step to go ahead and help that person become a certified foster home. And then I'd be keeping some data and information on my end to help designate them within our DCFS system as being a Native home.
Thank you. Another question. So of those 3 states who don't support ICWA, do they still follow ICWA processes? So like if there's a Native child that's in the state of Indiana, what would happen to that child because Indiana doesn't support ICWA?
I can't speak specifically on Indiana, but I know with Texas, DCFS has mentioned their support of ICWA, even though the state does not support ICWA. So within DCFS, a lot of the locations have kind of agreements where they work with the tribes in the area. And then there's private adoption agencies, though, who do not support ICWA and will not follow through with that. And because the state is not in agreement with ICWA, there aren't consequences at the moment. So it kind of just depends on where the child is taken into care at.
Okay, and I have one more question. Any other question? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then I guess my last question is, how does ICWA, like in Illinois, reach out to the tribes? Like, is there a network? Like, who do you all know? Like, if they said, oh, this child is from this tribe, do you all just have a list of the contacts at the tribes, for all 574 registered? How do you maintain that database to know to reach out to those and who to reach out to at the tribe?
So we We get this information currently from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. They're the ones who keep record of the federally recognized tribes and a contact person for the tribe. So say if someone were to say they're Sioux, we would go ahead and send out an inquiry to the BIA and also every single Sioux tribe. So whether that's Rosebud, Lower Brule, etc., we will contact every single Sioux tribe. And that's a mix between using the information from the BIA and also the ICWA specialist doing our own personal research to try and talk to whether it's like an ICWA program person there or the tribal court system. For example, sometimes I've gone to the tribe's website and I've gone ahead and called the tribal administrator, asked to be put through with the tribal court system, and then I just kind of navigate who to talk to within the tribe. So we do have like an official list of all the tribes in a contact, and the BIA does ask for that to be updated every couple of years. But in addition to that, myself and my coworker also do some more investigation to try and push through being able to contact a tribe.
Okay, thank you, Ryann. And we got questions. Okay, come over here and speak to the mic. Sorry.
So my question is around, so ICWA is really about what happens, in order to place a child that's entered care.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that ICWA permits or supports, at least in Illinois, around supports transitioning back into home or preventing the child from being removed at all?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it really just the once that removal into care has happened?
We do also try to help prevent the removal in the first place. We would call that an intact ICWA case where I work. I have a couple cases that I'm working on that are intact cases. And with that, we work with the caseworkers to see how are mom and dad doing? Are they following a service plan? If there's any obstacles with the parents following through with the service plan. And say like a Native family is at risk of the kids being taken into care due to financial reasons, then the caseworker and myself would look into resources that can be given to the family. One of those is called like the Norman Funds, where we would help to do what we can to keep the kids with their families to begin with. And even if they're taken into care, we still advocate that they be returned home to who their primary caregiver was, and that they be given more opportunities than an average bio parent, I suppose, on being able to regain their children. I hope that answered it. Okay.
Yes. Yep. And we have a question coming over.
So you had mentioned that if you were interested in becoming a certified foster parent, you were saying that seen as when you have a child for placement, the first thing ICWA does is go to the tribes for that child. Perhaps then, if you were interested in being a foster, a native foster parent, perhaps it would be better for you to go then to your tribe rather than to see whether or not you qualify, seeing as that is where you would, where ICWA would be looking for a parent for the child. Correct?
That would be a good option because when we reach out to the tribes, we will ask the tribe if they have a preference. And if a tribe already knows of someone in Illinois who they would like to have foster the family, then we would take that into really great consideration. But sometimes we also have a lot of tribes who just don't want to intervene at all. They don't want to be part of the custody hearings. And in that part, we would want to go through our own system to find a native home. So I don't see the harm in talking to both your own tribe and also to the state of Illinois.
In both sources. Okay. Is there any list or place you can find for what would meet the what qualifications that you look for?
For licensing a foster home in general, or for a native home?
For you to become qualified as a foster family. What are the qualifications are you looking for?
So for that, I would go ahead and go to the DCFS website to begin with. There's a whole process on doing a physical look through with the home, doing background checks, etc.
Okay, so if you then qualify for DCFS as a foster parent in general, and you are also Native, that would automatically make you qualify for ICWA?
Correct. And so that's part of why I'm wanting to have a marker within our own DCFS foster home system on which families are Native, because at the moment we don't have that. But being able to mark off that, yes, you're Native and yes, you're a licensed foster home, that would go ahead and have you considered as like an ICWA home within our state.
Do you have information as towards what the ratio is to children, Native children needing a home versus Native families, the amount of Native families available to offer that? Is there a ratio, a shortage? Is there something is that data known?
That data is not known, and it's been something I've been pushing to collect because a lot of our children are going misidentified to begin with. So I'm working on that end. I would say, though, that the majority of the ICWA cases I've been working with, the children are actually fostered still with family. And when that's not an option, it's been a lot of non-Native foster families then. There's only a handful of known Native foster homes within our state.
My interest in this is I had an uncle, he's passed now. I was a child at the time, but I had cousins. He was a foster parent, Native foster parent, and his Chaganasi wife had eventually adopted 2 children, and they also had children of their own. They adopted 2 children who were full-blood Native, and my cousins, Sue and John. I'm not sure where they came from, but I'm thinking perhaps maybe Susan was Ojibwe, the same, but I don't, and John was a full-blood, but I'm thinking he might have been Lakota. But that was an issue even back then, and that was back in the 70s. Mm-hmm. So it's much interest that I look into now. It's in curiosity because I was a child, another child in that family. All of a sudden, cousins that came into our family that were Native.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, Ryann, I want to thank you for your time. And I know the topic, it's much needed in our community. We hear of ICWA, but sometimes we don't know the exact details. I learned a lot for sure. I just encourage everyone to please complete the survey session on the back of the booklet. And then for those online, I posted the link in the chat. Anyone who completes the survey, let me know and I'll give you a raffle ticket. We have raffle prizes at the end of the conference, at the end of our closing session. So it should be a QR code on the back of the book where you can download the link to the survey. So yeah, thank you so much, Ryann, and appreciate everyone who was able to join the Zoom. We'll go ahead and end the session. And this is recorded. We'll edit it out and send out the recordings of all the sessions. So thank you again, Ryann, for your time and your wealth of knowledge.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Okay, have a good afternoon.